Hello and welcome to Geek Speak with Envision IT, the podcast for business leaders and technology experts that like to stay on top of the latest security news and listen to interviews with insightful industry leaders. I'm Bill Crane, Chief Stakeholder Architect and CTO with Envision IT. Let's get started. Today's topic comes from two different requests about IoT security and what we can do to keep our network secure from those devices. It's interesting, oftentimes we think of IoT and we think of smart devices such as phones, watches, TVs, those types of devices on your home networks. But we're actually seeing a lot of these in the enterprise network. One thing that we've had around forever are printers, for example. You may not think of those as IoT devices, but really they are. You can't push down the same tools and have the same policies for a printer that you can for such as a Windows endpoint, for example. So it's a pretty good example of that. And we are seeing a lot of other devices, certainly smart monitors and TVs, but also we have customers that, in their industry, they have maybe, HVAC devices or maybe refrigeration devices. And those vendors are asking them, hey, can you install this, management device and we'll remotely monitor and manage that device for you, which is great. But again, that device isn't managed by you. So you can't have the same policies and tools and logging for those devices. So it's really concerning. And it is becoming a bigger and bigger issue to be aware of. IoT devices in 2020, there was approximately 20 plus billion devices out there. They suspect by 2025, there's going to be 30 plus billion. So that's actually 4 devices per person, which is pretty amazing. Some of the dangers of these IoT devices that, we already talked about not being able to install the same tools. Oftentimes these are lockdown devices. So, we don't have a ton of management over them. And, one of the things that we can sometimes do is, maybe we do certain testing, do some research on devices, and maybe we say, okay, we do trust this device today. The problem is we don't have control over what that device is going out to the internet and downloading, right? So it might be safe today and very, very dangerous tomorrow. And, once these devices become compromised, they certainly move laterally throughout your environment, trying to infect other systems, compromise systems, steal data. So it's really a big concern. Some of the IoT compromises that we've been seeing lately, some are just being used to mine, cryptocurrency, which isn't great, but it's pretty less damaging, at least for now. But a lot of them are being used for, these giant botnets for doing distributable denial of service against other organizations. And, some of the challenge that we have is some of these devices, maybe they're ran by an organization and everything was great for a couple of years. But what happens when that organization, that vendor goes out of business? You now have a device that is no longer getting updates. And as of, the last year or two, we've seen a ton of vulnerabilities come out with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, et cetera. And, those all require some sort of updates. So if your device is no longer getting updates, it's probably a pretty dangerous device on your network. So, and then just the last thing is, some of these devices we're finding that maybe they have some back doors, either on purpose or not, but, they might be usernames and passwords that are hard coded in the device, or every single device has the same default username and password. So, that kind of feeds into some of our recommendations. Certainly, take the default usernames, passwords, and give them a really complex password. Store those in your password vault. If you can enable multi-factor authentication, absolutely do. Make sure that those devices are in your asset list. Keep track of when they were added and what you're going to do when they become a certain age. Also, if you can proxy all of their outbound and inbound internet traffic, through some sort of system that's can inspect the traffic, potentially firewall them off. And if you know that they only need to talk to certain external systems, create an allow list that only allows that and then blocks everything else. That would definitely go a long ways. And then absolutely don't ever allow inbound ports to that device. And, a good practice is certainly to also segment that device onto its own network. Oftentimes we'd call that a DMZ. So that's really critical. You don't want that device to get compromised and then spread to all your other corporate systems as well. Lastly, I would say, make sure your users understand, that, hey, we have this network policy and you just can't bring something in and plug it into our network. So make sure people understand that and the risks involved there. Even go as far as, blocking, open network ports, in your offices as well. So you can't just plug something in and have it on your corporate network. Those are some ideas around IoT security, and hopefully that's helpful. Thank you everyone for joining us today. If you have any questions or if you have future topics you'd like us to cover, please connect with us via the link in the show notes. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time on Geek Speak with Envision IT.